everyone. Welcome to the second day of the virtual edition of the UK and Brazil Partners in Energy. My name is Ana Terra, and I am the Business Development Manager for Renewable Energy for TIT, the UK Department for International Trade. The objective of the conference is to enable discussions and collaboration between the UK and Brazil on several themes around energy. Today's event is about the future of distributed generation. The event has simultaneous translation. To access the language, just select the option Interpretation on the bottom bar of your screen and choose the language of your choice. The functionality is available in the Zoom app only. When you access Zoom by your browser, you only hear the original language. Also, in the bottom bar of your screen, we will find the quick questions and answers function. Feel free to use this function at any time to send questions. They will be transmitted to the panelists and answered at the end of the session. We would like to make this event as collaborative as possible, so we encourage you to send your questions to the chat or use the questions and answers function throughout the event. We want to hear your comments and insights on the various topics that you will be covering today. The speaker's presentation will be made available on the event website in the coming days at the same website that you registered. The webinars will be recorded and made available at the UK and Brazil YouTube channel after the event in the coming days. Now, I would like to introduce today's session moderator, Fábio Caldas. Fábio is the president of the Rio de Janeiro branch of BRICHAM, the British Chamber, and one of the founders of the Renewables Committee at BRICHAM, and an important partner of TIT here in Brazil. Fábio is an engineer with postgraduate degrees in administration, system analysis, marketing, and finance. He worked for Shell for 25 years when he led positions in the company's headquarters in Brazil and the UK, being director of external relations for Latin America. Also, he led the communications and institutional relations for the utility company CPFL, and in 2018, he founded Lightsaber Consultancy with focus on institutional relations, non-technical risks, and communications. Now, I hand over to Fábio, and I wish you all a great session and a discussion, lots of discussions and mutual learning. Thank you. Fábio, over to you.
Many thanks indeed, Anna, for the opening. Also to your team there, and also to the UK government for the invitation to moderate this session on the future of DG distributed generation in the UK and Brazil. And I also thank you for the very strong partnership with the British Chamber of Commerce. Right, so good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I hope that you enjoy the session. Thank you also to Rachel, Gabriel, I was gonna say Gabriel, but it's Gabriel in Portuguese. Gabriel, Aurélio, Jamie, and André for being here. This is going to be the order of speaking. So Rachel, Gabriel, Aurélio, Jamie, and André. And thank you all for your attendance here. So I hope that everyone here are doing well, you know, during these difficult times globally. And I'm sure that the picture we're going to see here will provide an energy boost for us all, looking at the opportunities in the near and far future in both countries. Right. I hope that your families as well are well as well. So we're going to discuss here the objective of this session is to discuss the role that DG will play in the future of the electricity matrix in the UK and Brazil. And we're going to focus on three major issues: regulation, innovation, and business environment, in order to guarantee investments, the achievement of CO2 emission targets, and energy security. And I was going to make an appeal here, you know, don't be shy. Please do ask questions, take the opportunity via the Q&A tool. Make your comments in the chat as well, but the question is going to be via the Q&A tool, as Anna said. And I'm going to be helped by her and the organizing team on that, on the Q's and A's. Write your name, company, if you want to address a particular speaker or in general, and your base country. So I'm going to read the bio. I'm not going to speak much here. I'm going to be basically passing it over from speaker to speaker in that order. I'm going to read the bio of Rachel here, and then she's going to take the stage. Rachel Sidell, Head of Future Networks, Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, which is a UK ministerial government department with responsibility for business, industrial strategy, science, research and innovation, energy and clean growth, and climate change. Rachel heads up the Future Networks team within the wider BEIS Net Zero Electricity Networks team. With 4 years experience working on electricity policy, she specialized in electricity network regulation and has previously worked on system operation policy and smart energy. Good luck there, Rachel. Take the stage. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that introduction, Fabio. I will share my screen now so you can see my presentation. I hope that has worked. Hopefully someone will shout at me if it hasn't. So thank you very much for that introduction, Fabio. So yes, I'm Rachel Stell. I head up the Future Networks team in BEIS. I'm here to talk to you today about the regulatory landscape of the electricity networks in Great Britain, and a little bit about how they can support distributed energy in Great Britain in order to achieve net zero by 2050. So this slide just gives you an overview of what I'll be talking to you about over the next 10 minutes or so. So first of all, I'll just do a quick overview of what the electricity system looks like and who the main players are across it. Then I'll go into a little bit more about the challenge that distributed energy, among other things, to achieve net zero poses to the network. And then the last three sections will focus on those challenges and how network regulation is working to overcome them. So if I go straight on to this slide. So this slide sets out the electricity system as a whole across Great Britain. It's worth noting that Northern Ireland is not part of the electricity network on Great Britain. And so I will be only focusing on Great Britain today. So that is England, Scotland and Wales. So if we look at the left side of the screen, this sets out the main sort of day-to-day network management players. So we have transmission network companies and distribution network companies. These are regional monopolies and they are regulated by our independent regulator, Ofgem. We also have the National Grid ESO. So they're the system operators. They're in charge of, amongst other things, balancing the system. And then on the right side, you can see I've included BEIS as the government department responsible for electricity networks. So what government does is it sets the wider policy landscape. And Ofgem is an independent regulator, as I've mentioned before, and what they do is they set regulation for networks. And if I just go on to the next slide, you can see here I've pulled out the two main parts of network regulation I'll be focusing on throughout this presentation. So first of all, you have the electricity network price control. So as electricity network companies are regional monopolies, as I set out on the slide before, Ofgem regulates them, so it sets their baseline allowances and what outputs are expected from networks, and it also sets what returns are allowed for shareholders. The reason this is important is because electricity network costs about 1/4 of GB consumers' bills, and that's why Ofgem regulates these things. The second point is the electricity charging regime. So this is the charge that network users pay to access and then to use the system. The aim of these is that they should reflect users' costs that they put on the network, and it also sends signals so that users can join the network at the most efficient point. So this slide just sets out a bit of the challenge. So in June 2019, the UK government legislated so that we would achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So this will impact both the supply and demand on the network. So if I start with demand first, we have a lot of low carbon technologies that will be required to achieve net zero. So that could include heat pumps and electric vehicles. So because of this and other things, demand on the network is expected to double by 2050. And in order to meet that demand, 4 times the current generation will be needed. As it stands, over 50% of the UK's power is from low carbon generation. But obviously this will have to be ramped up to meet the demand in the future. So low carbon renewable power presents challenges to the network. And the 2 main ones I'll be focusing in on today. First of all, system operation, so balancing supply and demand. And the second part is about connecting to the network and ensuring the network has sufficient capacity to make use of that generation. So in terms of balancing the network, the reason this is a challenge as low carbon generation joins the network is twofold. First of all, low carbon generation quite often depends on the weather. You can see I've included a picture of a wind farm and solar. So these are mainly used across the UK for renewables, and it's not always sunny in the UK. So that can affect when generation comes on, and it may not necessarily meet with when demand is. And so there's that challenge of balancing in terms of time. And then also there's a locational challenge. Because across Great Britain we have different weather systems, quite often it's more efficient to put, for example, offshore wind in Scotland, where it's more windy than it is in the southeast of England, whereas a lot of the demand is in the southeast of England. So you can see there are 2 challenges. First of all, temporal in terms of balancing supply and demand at the right time, and secondly, locational in terms of where the generation is and where the demand is. So how do we solve this? So the government and Ofgem are working very closely with industry to support and remove barriers to markets for smart technologies like demand-side response and electricity storage. So this allows for balancing that generation and demand so that the electricity is used. So in July 2017, we published the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan, which you can see a picture of there. So what this does is it sets out actions for government and Ofgem to support these technologies, and an update will be coming later this year. Another aspect of this is utilising network data. So this is a case of collecting data on the networks and using it efficiently to forecast and plan the network. In July 2018, I believe it was, the government launched the Energy Data Task Force, and they reported in July 2019. And what government, the regulator, and industry are doing together is working to make sure that data can support system operation. So another challenge is for renewables is they obviously have to connect to the electricity network to be useful. So there are challenges on networks in terms of connecting them speedily, easily, and the cost is not too great. So on the left side of the slide, you can see I'm focusing on the speed and ease of connections. So Ofgem uses the price control to incentivize networks to do this both speedily and easily. So I've included a few examples of how they do this. So first of all, you've got customer satisfaction. As part of the price control, there are various surveys and what have you, which measure customer satisfaction, and networks are rewarded if they do well. And obviously, if you get a nice, easy, quick connection, that's an important part of consumer satisfaction. So, sorry, customer satisfaction. Another example is guaranteed standards of service. So all networks are expected to comply with these. And sorry, excuse me. So if they don't comply with them, there are Ofgem can take penal action. and in the time to connect incentive. So networks are rewarded for connecting customers quickly. So that's how Ofgem can use the price control to make sure that works easily for customers. Government's also working with network companies and Ofgem to ensure there's greater consistency across the network. Because the networks are able to connect in their own way with customers, there is sometimes discrepancy between the regions, and that's why we're working to ensure consistency and also to encourage flexible connections. So what this is where the network can connect, the customer can connect to the network through a flexible connection. So they understand that at some points their generation may be curtailed. But what this does is it allows greater capacity on the network. So this has already freed up to about 3 gigawatts on the network thus far, and could be more useful in the future. And then moving to the right side of the slide. So the cost of connecting to the network. So Ofgem, like I said before, Ofgem sets the charging regime, which sets the charges for customers to join the network and then to use it on an ongoing basis. So Ofgem currently has an access and forward-looking charges review. So this is considering, they're looking at how this will impact on renewables across Great Britain, amongst other things. So this could include upfront connection charges, so how expensive it is, and reflecting the reinforcement on the network cost required, and also ongoing charges and how this will impact particularly on smaller scale generation projects. And the final element of the challenge from renewable generation on the network is ensuring there's enough capacity to get the generation from where it is to the demand. So focusing on the right first, I've mentioned before, you can use smart solutions to transfer, to store electricity when it's used and only release it when it's needed. So that addresses that temporal challenge of supply and demand. Sometimes this is not enough and you will need to reinforce with additional physical infrastructure. So the picture on the slide on the right-hand side is an example of this. So the Western HVDC link between Scotland and England brings a lot of generation from Scotland, particularly wind production, down to England where there is greater demand. So how these sorts of projects are currently regulated are through RIIO. So Ofgem considers them and makes sure they're efficient. In order to support this further, in December, in the Energy White Paper, the UK government committed to introduce legislation to enable competitive tenders for onshore networks. This is expected to save up to £1 billion on projects tendered over the next 10 years, as we're reinforcing for net zero. So it's enabling the networks to meet the net zero needs whilst not costing consumers as much as it potentially could. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of network regulation in GB. Overall, hopefully you can see how it's very much a holistic approach across industry, government, and the regulator. I think there'll be a Q&A session at the end, so I won't invite questions now. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed, Rachel, for quite synthetic presentation and quite deep. You know, I was quite impressed with the two challenges, the systems operation and the networks. And I would have a question on governance, right? How is the governance of working with the industry on this? And I like very much the RIIO, the RIIO model. I live in Rio, the RIIO model, which includes innovation in it. So very interesting indeed. So I'll go now for Gabriel Conzen. I'm going to read the bio of Gabriel. Energy Research Analyst at EPE, Empresa de Planejamento Energético, company of energy planning. This is a translation, EPE. The Energy Research Office, EPE, in this Portuguese acronym, aims at supporting the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy, MME, in Portuguese as well. Energy policies, the MME energy policy, with studies and research on energy planning, covering electricity, oil, natural gas, and its derivatives, and biofuels. Our studies cover the areas of engineering, economics, modeling, policy, and environment, and where they overlap. Gabriel Conzen has been working at EPE since 2013, developing economic and regulatory studies in the area of distributed energy resource, which is RED in Portuguese, and solar energy. He's an electrical engineer from the Federal University of Mato Grosso and has a master's degree in energy from the University of São Paulo, USP. He conducted studies involving market designs for RED, which is DER, distributed generation market projection, impact assessment, economic and financial analysis of projects, incentive policies, mapping the technical potential of the source, amongst others. In addition to working at EPE, he did studies with the IDEAL Institute, IDEAL Institute, and Greenpeace in the area of distributed photovoltaic PV generation. Gabriel, good luck there. Floor's yours.
Thank you, Fabio. I'm gonna share my screen. I hope you are seeing that. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Today, I would like to share with you basically three messages regarding distributed generation in Brazil. The first message is that distributed generation is already a big market in Brazil. As you can see here, last year in 2020, we added 2.5 gigawatts of distributed solar power, which is more than any other conventional source, more than thermoelectric, more than hydro, more than wind and solar farms. So this is already a big business here. And why is that? Why these big numbers? Well, first of all, Brazil has a very generous regulatory framework for distributed generation. In 2012, ANEEL, which is the regulatory agency here, enacted a very comprehensive net metering scheme, and not only the classic net metering scheme for on-site generation, but also a virtual net metering, which means you can generate remotely and use the credits to offset your consumption far from your home, in other place. And this without paying any grid fee. So this is quite generous. The net metering scheme is valid for power plants up to 5 megawatts from any renewable source or cogeneration. The second point I would like to highlight is the great irradiation levels spread across the country, which means we have very good economic attractiveness on the investments made in distributed generation in Brazil. You can see here in this chart that the payback period for residential and commercial applications in 2020 are now shorter than 5 years. And as a comparison, I made a quick research on the economic attractiveness on the UK. And if I'm not mistaken, the payback period for distributed solar in the UK is usually longer than 12 years. So as a comparison, Brazil has excellent conditions. Now I'd like to show you the evolution of the cell capacity. You can see here that we reached almost 5 gigawatts at the end of 2020. And the annual installations in 2020 grew by 60% compared to 2019. And this is in a pandemic year. Also, I would like to highlight the predominance of the photovoltaic technology. You can see here that photovoltaic has consolidated itself as the main technology in the distributed generation market in Brazil. Next, I'll show you that roughly 80% of the projects are in on-site projects, and 20% of the installed capacity is in remote installations. Also, you can see here that community projects represent just a tiny part of the market. These kind of projects have not yet taken off in Brazil. And finally, I would like to highlight one trend that is the increasing participation both in the residential sector and the rural sectors in terms of installed capacity. Okay, now I'll move to the second message. And Despite the growth of this market, there are some uncertainties for the coming years, especially on the regulatory side. First of all, there are some discussions about the net metering scheme, a revision of the net metering scheme. Today, as I mentioned before, the generator uses the energy credits to offset all tariff components. You can see here the main components, and basically he doesn't pay for any grid fee or sectorial charges. This is an incentive that was given in the beginning of the program to accelerate the distributed generation market. However, with the cost reduction we have seen in the recent years, the huge expansion of DG, now it makes sense to discuss revision of the rules, the net metering rules in Brazil, to reduce the incentives in order to maintain the economic sustainability of the power system. And this is because there is plenty of evidence that the net metering scheme creates a cross subsidy between consumers. So this is why it's being discussed revision of the net metering scheme in Brazil right now. The second point is the implementation of a two-part tariff. Today, the majority of the consumers in low voltage pay a single flat volumetric tariff in reais per kilowatt hour. And there is a discussion underway to recover, especially the distribution costs and transmission costs, through a fixed charge or a demand charge in reais per kilowatt, for instance. Both of these topics, the net metering scheme and the two-part tariff, are being discussed by ANEEL, the regulatory agency, and the Congress. There's a wide discussion right now among these topics. But there are a lot of questions remaining without answers. We don't know exactly if we will have any changes at all, what the new model of net metering will look like, which of the tariff components could be offset, when the changes will take effect, and the questions are quite the same for the implementation of a two-part tariff. So there's a lot of uncertainties. However, I'd like to, I guess it's worthwhile to mention that just recently in 2020, in December 2020, the National Energy Policy Council published some guidelines to design and implement policies for DG in Brazil. And the first determination is that everybody should have access to the grids, to the network, without discrimination. The second guideline is that the new rules, the new policy must follow a legal and regulatory security, which means provide deadlines for maintaining the incentives for current consumers who already have invested in distributed generation. In other words, it means no retroactive cuts. The third point is the correct allocation of grid costs and sectorial charges, which means the generators will have to pay for the grid costs and sectorial charges. However, when designing the new policy, the new rules, it also have to include the benefits of DG to counterbalance the costs. The next point is transparency and predictability in the process of elaboration, implementation, and monitoring of the policy. And last but not least, the changes must be gradual. So all these guidelines provide more security and transparency for the investors. However, on the planning side, in our point of view at EPE, we still have many uncertainties to do the planning. So given these uncertainties, EPE drew two scenarios in order to visualize the possible outcomes and to plan the energy mix for the next 10 years. We did this analysis last year before the guidelines, but I guess it's worthwhile to present here. There are two scenarios, as I mentioned. The first scenario is called summer. In this scenario, we assume that Brazil chooses to maintain a policy of great incentive for DG. You can see here that the new rules for net metering will be in place in 2022 and the implementation of a two-part tariff in 2026. Regarding the net metering scheme, the generator will be able to compensate all tariff components except the distribution costs. And regarding the two-part tariff, the the generator will have to pay the distribution and transmission costs through a fixed charge or through a demand charge. On the other side, in the spring scenario, Brazil chooses to remove most of the tariffs incentives for DG. You can see here that both changes are implemented in 2022. And in this scenario, we assume that the generator will have to pay for most of the grid costs and sectorial charges, and will be able to compensate only the energy part of the tariff. And regarding the two-part tariff, it's similar to the previous scenario. He'll have to pay distribution and transmission costs through a fixed charge or a demand charge. But the good news is that, just a second. The good news is that even with the most severe changes, as I show you in the spring scenario, for instance, the investments in DG will still be attractive in Brazil for the next 10 years. I show you here that for residential and commercial applications, both in low voltage and for high voltage consumers, the rates of return will still be higher than 10% per year in the most severe case. So this is quite attractive compared to other investments opportunities in Brazil today. So the final message here, the third message I'd like to share with you is that even with the changes that are being discussed on the regulatory side, the distributed generation market will continue to grow in Brazil. We expect that in the summer scenario, we're gonna reach 25 gigawatts of installed capacity in 2030, which means 3 million consumers with DG and roughly 90 billion reais investments until 2030. In the spring scenario, we expect 17 gigawatts of installed capacity, which means 2 million consumers with DG and roughly 60 billion reais in investments. Finally, we expect that PV will still be the main technology in the distributed generation market along the next 10 years. So to sum up, the three messages I'd like to share with you today is that, first of all, distributed generation is already a big market in Brazil. Two, there are some uncertainties for the coming years, especially on the regulatory side, that might slow down a bit the growth of this market. However, even with the changes in the rules, the distributed generation market will continue to grow and to flourish in Brazil. So now I'll hand it over to Fabio. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed, Gabriel. Very clear. I like very much this final message, just summarizing everything. My attention was quite raised by the current IRR of 5 years. Currently, you said in the beginning, and the two scenario analysis, with IRR at very good levels at the end. So now I'll go to Aurelio, right? I won't speak much here, guys. Aurelio Souza, he's the counselor. He's a counselor at ABGD, which is in Portuguese, the Brazilian Association of DG, Associação Brasileira de Geração Distribuída, ABGD, is a legal entity of private law, non-profit, which brings together solution providers, EPCs, integrators, distributors, manufacturers, companies of different sizes and segments, in addition to professionals and academics in the sector that have in common the direct or indirect performance in DG for renewable source. It has quite an impressive website. I like that very much. Very simple and clean. Aurelio is a mechanical engineer specialized in regulation of the energy industry with over 26 years of experience in the development of projects and business in the energy sector and sustainable development, with a focus on solar energy technologies, photovoltaic and thermal, biogas, energy efficiency and services, environmental factors, forest carbon. It accumulates the following positions: counselor at ABGD, the Brazilian Association of DG, founder of Usina Azul engineering consultancy companies in the renewable energy segment, member of the Private Sector Advisory Group, PSAG, PSAG, at the United Nations Green Fund for Climate Change, GCF, collaborator researcher at the PV Systems Laboratory, LSF, of the Institute of Energy and Environment, IEE, at USP, University of São Paulo, counselor at the Brazilian Solid Waste Energy Association, ABERS, member of the board of directors of Instituto Clima Info. It's a lot, Aurelio.
Yes,
Senior
a lot of work.
consultant for the energy program, BEP, of the Prosperity Fund, PF, of the United Kingdom. Congratulations for this, and have a great session. And look, guys, you're too shy in the Q's and A's, you know. Do make questions to Rachel, Gabriel, and now Aurelio. Please bomb them with questions. Later, we'll pass the questions for them. Aurelio, take the stage. It's all yours.
All right, I'm sharing my screen now. Thanks, Fabio. It's always difficult to present anything after Gabriel because he's an excellent presenter and has a lot of information. And congratulations, Gabriel, on your doctor approval. I know you're gonna do great. Moving ahead, ABGD is the Brazilian Association of companies and entrepreneurs working with distributed generation, all source of renewable energy. It was funded in 2015. So it's comprised by integrators, installers, distributors, manufacturers, engineers, energy traders. It's not only companies, but people as well. Move on here. We provide a lot of service to our members, no legal advice, no participation, networking, discussion, training, and so on, certification, many service we provide, adding value to the market. And we have a very strong institutional relationship with all energy sectors, key stakeholders like MME, ANEL, EPE, working close with Congress, the Parliament on regulatory issues and so on, in all levels, because you know in Brazil, at the state level, you can have specific policies towards renewable energy and GG as well. So it's a very interesting association. A lot of people, 800 plus, 900 associates so far. We have some. We have websites and participate in all the social medias. You can look in there. From now on, every time I say DG, I'm meaning the definition given by ANEL on this normative resolution 482 from 2012 that Gabriel mentioned, that established the conditions for micro and mini power generation to access the electricity grid. So whenever I say micro, I mean systems that below 75 kilowatts. When I say mini, is below 5 megawatts, except for hydro, which is 3 megawatts. So this is a technology that's access the grid and allow consumers to produce their own energy. Nowadays, we even have a word in Portuguese. It's prosumer, I guess in English as well, which is the guy that produce and consume its own energy on a net metering scheme that Gabriel mentioned. Looking back and looking forward, GG is not new. You can see there is a law in 2004 discussing the early stage. Even before that, distributed generation is around for some time. But DG, as we speak now, it's around since 2012, the two in the middle. And now it was improved in 2015, allowing remote self-consumption, shared generations, other than just installed on the load on the rooftop. And the way forward is to change the regulatory in a way that the consumer and the prosumer is the center of the action. So the legal and the regulatory stability is what we're looking at. There's a lot of benefits of DG. For the sake of time, I'm going to go very fast on that because everybody knows the benefits of renewable energy, of installing power capacity in the tip of the grid, So in the case of Brazil, we alleviate a lot the energy demand and save water in the reservoirs. Brazil, as you know, hydropower generation is strong here, between 70, 80%. It depends on the year and the seasons, if it's dry or humid. Of course, distributed generation based on renewable energy. It saves us from burning fossil fuels and reduce pollution, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, eliminates and postpone investment in transmission grids when you generate near the load, and also reduce costs related to loss in the energy grid because you inject energy very close to the load. So improve security and, in our vision, reduce the price of energy to everyone when you are able to postpone investment and be more efficient. GG is growing, no doubt about it. Since January up to now, last week actually, 12th, 250,000 systems has been installed, nearly 250,000 systems. The biggest states in installation are Minas Gerais, São Paulo, and Rio Grande do Sul, as you can see there. I'm going to go fast because time is flying. This shows installations per type of consumer. Gabriel mentioned that, so I'm going to go straight to the end where I summarize all of this. So the biggest ones are, of course, generation by the load, and the consumer is also a single consumer, so households. Solar is the biggest source of energy, and it's growing. So in terms of energy use, 97% is solar, and energy injected in the grid, 95% solar. There's other smaller components there. In terms of installation, Gabriel pointed out, I'm just going to reinforce here, residential, commercial, and rural are the biggest consumers. Again, in terms of installed capacity, as you can see, the commercial systems are bigger. That's why the size, they are very close to the residential in terms of installed capacity. But rural, in this case, is growing fast. The agro business is now paying attention to solar for irrigation, for other demands of energy. So in resume, in summary, the predominancy is behind the meter installations, 80% of installation and 80% of the 86% of installation and 80% of the installed capacity is behind the meter. Solar is 97%. I'm not going to repeat. And the majority of the installations are residential and commercial buildings. I'm just repeating what I just mentioned. In numbers, just last year, GG was responsible for investment nearly 11 billion reais and generated something like 75,000 jobs. In the forecast for this year now is another 17 billion investment. I even put there in pounds, 2.46 billion pounds as money of yesterday, a couple of days ago, and 150,000 new jobs generated. So by 2032, it is expected the GG producers and consumers will save around 14 billion reais. So this being regulated by ANEEL in the absence of a specific legislation, but now there is a need for creation of a specific regulatory framework for DG as it is growing so fast. This is happening. This is the review process, how it went. I'm looking at my clock here. I don't have much time, so I'm going to go through fast. But this is just a ongoing process being discussed, and the alternatives on the table is represents a series of changes in which part of the tariff, as Gabriel mentioned, will be charged. There's a lot of questions, I understand. The scenario that ANEEL posed was to charge 63% of the energy, and the scenario that the industry is looking for is up to 20%. It looks like from where here, it will be around somewhere in the middle. 28, 30%, but this is not certain yet. I'm going to go fast through this because Gabriel already mentioned the National Council Energy Policy Resolution. And because of that, there is now a substitute bill, which is number 5829, that's been pushing the, let's say, an agreement between the sectors, both utilities, consumers, industry, to come up with a solution. This substitute bill the rationale behind that is to promote the democratization, the use of solar energy, because solar energy is the highest, let's say, source of use. Creates an opportunity for over 50 million consumers to access these benefits of using and generate your own energy. Nowadays, not possible, mostly low-income consumers. Brings a legal certainty and clarity to the table, fully pays or charge and pays for the use of the wire, which is an issue, a central issue of this regulation and the need for such regulation, and establish a transition period. This is the substitute. This is a graphic showing what's on the table, showing what's ahead. The proposal is to have like a transition period beginning 12-month period after the law is approved, but it fully pays for the grid, and there is a differentiation here between the size and the power between 200 kilowatt and below 200 kilowatt. So this would add and create the opportunities for nearly 50 million households to access the energy grid and have its own energy. This is the same, just another way to present it. So the substitute bill is supported by all renewable energy associations, AB Solar, BGD, biogas, small hydropower, renewable residue, Enel, and others. And there is a sectorial agreement under construction to be voted by the Parliament soon, in light what was defined by the regulatory framework and following CNP policy. So the way ahead, I have two more slides, Fabio. The way ahead, if we follow this Bloomberg Finance projections for 2040, and solar represent 30% of the electricity matrix in Brazil, GD for sure will be a huge component, maybe with 75% of this share. Looking ahead as well, we see hybrid systems. This is a case of one of our members. It's a hydropower coupled with a solar system. We have a biogas coupled with solar system because they use the same infrastructure and they could dispatch the energy on different times. And of course, we cannot forget storage. Storage is coming strong, and it makes a lot of sense between coupling distributed generation with energy stores and the benefit that this will bring to the grid. I think this is my last slide, Fabio. Thank you for having me, and this is our contacts.
Thank you very much, Aurelio, for your excellent overview, of the DG markets and the current regulatory framework. I like that very much. And I'm really, really curious about the latest technological developments on storage. Right?
Yes.
This is a question I would make if I were you, the audience. The questions are coming, but they're quite shy at the moment. Please take this opportunity, guys. Now I'm going for another impressive CV. By the way, all the CVs are very impressive here. I'm going to Jamie now. Jamie McDonald Murray, the CEO of Lizarb Energy. Let's guess. I found it great branding, by the way. Lizarb. Try and guess what is the, if you read it right to left, what is that? Right? Very, very interesting branding. Lizarb Energy is one of Brazil's, he's the CEO of Lizarb Energy. is one of Brazil's fastest growing solar developers. Its headquarters in the UK, the company develops, implements, and operates solar energy parks across Brazil, strategically placed in the growing Latin American solar energy market, producing green energy from the world's greatest natural power source. Jamie's entrepreneurial career spans 2 decades. Over that period, he has established and grown several successful businesses operating across leisure, property, and energy. He spent 12 years of his career working in Brazil. So you speak Portuguese?
Eu falo português, sim.
Fala português bem. He speaks well Portuguese. So 12 years of his career working in Brazil, where he developed a deep understanding of the country's business culture and all aspects of its operating environment. Now based in the UK, what a pity, but that's good for the UK. His interest in his sustainability and renewables provide the foundation to run and grow Lizard Energy. Jamie maintains strong connections with the green finance community through Lizard's London operations and visits Brazil regularly. So Jamie, thank you very much for being here. So you take the stage now. Good luck there.
Thanks, Fabio. Just share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now. So firstly, thank you very much to the other presentations. They were all very interesting to see. Lizard Energy was founded in 2017 by myself and my business partner, Gustavo Savelli. We are a UK company with Brazilian subsidiaries. Lizard developed solar energy parks across Brazil for both the distributed energy and centralized energy markets. Over the last 18 months, we have grown our pipeline by more than 50 times. We now count over 300 megawatts of distributed energy PPAs in 8 states across Brazil. And we have a pipeline of 1.8 gigawatts of centralized energy parks. We attract green finance from the City of London and worldwide. And as a company, we balance profit with purpose. As we already know, Brazil has one of the greenest and lowest carbon energy matrices in the world. That's thanks to the massive contribution of hydroelectric power. However, the aging hydroelectric power plants, which are location dependent, are suffering from underinvestment, droughts, and reduced rainfalls. Solar currently provides just under 2% of Brazil's energy matrix, but will play a central role by 2050. The case for solar is very strong. It's grown to become one of the most important sources of energy worldwide, with new solar capacity outstripping gas and coal, nuclear, and wind. Solar is emerging as the lowest cost power generation technology, thanks to falling cost of photovoltaics. Brazil's specific needs and attributes are a great match for solar. It is sunny after all. Businesses are increasingly embracing solar through power purchase agreements because they can access resilient, sustainable power that offers price stability over the long term. In terms of cost effectiveness, flexibility and speed of implementation, and potential to work in conjunction with other energy sources alongside battery storage, solar has a very strong case in Brazil's energy matrix. As other people have touched on, you can see that the forecast is that solar is going to play a very large part of the future matrix. Despite concerns over the Brazilian economy and the ongoing pandemic, there is still a strong case for investors when it comes to solar. The distributed energy PPA model is proving so successful because it balances the needs of off-takers and investors. Off-takers get competitively and predictably priced electricity over the long term, and investors know the project will generate healthy, risk-adjusted returns over the lifespan of the PPA. In Lizarb's case, our PPAs are all of 15 years or 20 years. The negatives, however, are key to mention, and we face continued challenges to the volatility and fluctuation of the Brazilian currency. It's a major hurdle. And we're obviously questioned about changes to the regulations, particularly in regards to distributed energy, and also to political risks. As a business, our number one requirement from government policy is the need for stability and dialogue. This is a big driver for international investors. We need to see continued progress to deregulate the energy market, to reduce bureaucracy, and to see tax reforms. It's been encouraging to see the broader business and market reforms, and we hope these will continue. In terms of solar-specific regulation, the current administration has removed import duties on foreign manufactured solar equipment, a move designed to encourage inward investment, which it does. We're excited to see the changes in regulations coming in 2025, which will enable consumers of under 500 kilowatts access the free market. Growth opportunities in Brazil are plain and simple. This is a market for 211 million people. Accessing it, though, takes expertise, experience, and determination. Distributed energy will be an integral and key driving force in the expansion of solar energy in Brazil. This will include the vast majority of corporates signing multiple megawatt PPAs. You will have smaller national companies joining consortiums to access distributed energy PPAs, or where possible, installing rooftop systems. Areas that are specifically interesting for Lizard is that of microgrids, in particular for the agribusiness and for mining operations. Combining solar with battery storage and other generation sources to create independent microgrids. Lizard are also invested in the rooftop space, and we see this as a key segment of our business going forward, giving us direct access to the SME market, as well as our blue chip corporates. Our experience throughout 2020, in particular, in the distributed market, is that ESG is now becoming a driving force, and corporates are seeking to purchase renewable energy. ESG is climbing the corporate agenda in Brazil, and we're seeing really that funders and also consumers are demanding that companies meet and achieve their ESG goals. By signing a PPA for solar energy, this is a clear and tangible demonstration to comply with ESG. We know international funders across all sectors are now pushing companies to bring low carbon and net zero credentials to the forefront, and this is directly increasing the rise in PPA contracts for distributed energy throughout Brazil. Brazil can undertake a green economic bounce. Investment is widely recognized as a recipe to reawaken economic growth, and post-pandemic Brazil can boost its economy by enabling investment in green energy infrastructure, as well as having an urgent need to replace its aging hydroelectric plants. There is a growing market for clean, predictably priced power. There are signs the government is shaping its reforms to encourage private inward investment in renewable projects, and we welcome this. While energy demand is growing, the government recognises that it cannot build a strong economy without investing in reliable infrastructure, and for this it does need outside help. Introducing new policies to support the green bounce will create many clean energy jobs and boost the wider economy. Strong supporting policies for green energy will ensure that key financial centres such as the City of London will continue to back the green energy transformation in Brazil. I'll wrap up here. I'd just like to thank the DIT and Fabio, obviously, for hosting the webinar.
Muito obrigado. Many thanks, Jamie, for your presentation. Yes, UK investment in solar projects can support Brazil's green bounce. I like that very much, this ending. And look, guys, I'm seeing so many opportunities, a giant opportunity. There are uncertainties, of course, but I'm seeing so much opportunity here. I'm really impressed, So thank you very much. Now I'm moving to André. I'm going to read his bio. Just a minute, because so many papers here. André Canelhas, isn't it André? Cut me off if I'm wrong here. André Canelhas, Innovation Leader at HVDC Tech. So we bring to the market world-class consultancy services to support stakeholders in power systems projects. Our contribution is based on ample experience with HVDC and FACTS FACTS activities, from network planning and conceptual systems designs to all stages in engineering, procurement, construction, commissioning, testing, operation, and maintenance during commercial operation. We cover the whole system to ensure optimum coordination and overall superior system performance. Or if required, we can concentrate on one of the major components in particular. Canelhas received his electrical engineering degree from the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro in 1979. We call it PUC, so you are a carioca, isn't it? Maybe a carioca who is born in Rio.
I was born in São Paulo, though.
So it's by heart. It's by heart. He had an early contact with large electrical power systems through a trainee program made at Furnas, one of the largest local power utilities. After graduation, he joined ABB, participating in the HVDC system design for the Itaipu, the big enterprise in the frontier with Paraguay. Within the Itaipu project, he was also responsible for system tests and commissioning. In 1984, he transferred to ABB headquarters in Sweden, becoming manager of system design as well as control and protection departments. In 1992, he has been appointed project manager for the 100 million project Contact HVDC cable interconnection between Denmark and Germany. For his performance in this job, he was awarded the Project Manager of the Year 1995 by the Swedish Project Academy. Andrea, many thanks for your presence here. The floor is yours. Make the most of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. Could you please put the slides? I think you were managing that. Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure being here. We are today covering a project, which is the PILAR project. And next slide, please. We will cover a project that is developed by the Brazil Energy Program, which is funded by the Brazil Energy Program, which is funded by the UK government Prosperity Fund. Next, please press next. Yes, the BEP, which is the Brazil Energy Program, main reasons and why it is here, it's to accelerate adoption of clean energy to support disadvantaged groups in Brazil, provides UK funding and international expertise. It includes as well regulatory and policy support and technology demonstration pilots. And this PILA project, that is the first project of this kind, is co-funded through Light SA, which is one of the major distribution companies in Brazil, through its R&D budget, and implemented by a team of UK and Brazilian organizations. Please, next, Fabio. It brings from the UK a long experience and tradition on distributed generation, as well as a mature market with a wide deployment of smart technologies. So this is also in the base here, and why we are trying to bring this to Brazil and collaborate with the local organizations to utilize this wealth of experience. Next slide, please, Fabio. How is the PILA solar project populated here? We have BP on one side and Light on the other side as the main project funding contribution. And then we have a project which is based on knowledge and information and exchange thereof, and innovation and smart technology added to it, and to create a business, scalable business model that is inclusive and can be used in all parts of Brazil, and hopefully will be several spin-offs of that. The group of companies, organizations in charge of the project at the moment is HVDC Tech and Entrust Microgrid from the UK, and Global Think Place is a consulting company, and Viva Rio, that is a social company, running hospitals and knowing very much the needs of the less privileged populations in Rio. Next slide, please. Where is the project located? Well, the project is in the north of Rio, at the outskirts of the city. It's PILA is a low-income community without access to government social aid and no social tariffs for electricity. And it's quite a large area in that community. And next slide, please. And this is a typical Brazilian community, as you can see here. It's 71% is under Brazil minimum, under the Brazil minimum wage, which is now 1,100 reais, and average per capita income is less than 600 reais. And through community engagement initiatives, investment in electric energy efficiency, Light has reduced the theft of electricity from 72 to 10%. So this, in spite of this community being poor and it's very well managed in terms of distribution, electric distribution there. It has lots of smart meters already installed, and we are going to utilize that as an infrastructure and boost from there. And into that, it was transformed, let's say, a number of clients, about 1,100 clients, into new form of clients. Please, the next slide. And what is the project about? The project, it will have two generation centers, power generation centers. One is installed as a PV 160 kilowatt peak in Light's substation nearby, and sent through the grid to the consumers in that particular community. And then around 30 houses will have 3 kilowatt peak PV plus 4 kilowatt battery storage, and will then, by the installation of smart meters and in telecommunication, be able to access its consumption and create a different pattern on how to use the energy in terms of time of use and other concepts to be introduced. And they will include either a home display with the mobile app plus home systems where they will be in full control. So we will have a social activity going beside of the technical and technology deployment to engage with the population and try to make experiments with different users and the different patterns of consumption and so on and so forth. We will have then a community center also in the same communication network that will gather data and Light will be participating through analyzing that data and from remote monitoring as well, from away from the community, as well as in the community with the community center control system. Next, please. So basically, what we'll have is that a number of houses will have their own solar PVs, as you know, a hybrid inverter with the battery and taking care of the battery system as well as the PV, and then with a smart meter, and then you will follow from your mobile application, oh my God, what is happening in terms of time of usage of energy, if you consume too much, or where great, I have done a saving this month, and that will create a new consumption pattern. And then at the same time, the community center will be retrieving all this data, informing, sharing good practice, and so on and so forth. So it's own or remote electricity generation there, a smart meter with the prosumers all over the place, with the Internet of Things, because the smart meters communicate with each other and concentrate the data in a way that is useful in the community center and remotely to Light. And we will have also the deployment of information and discussion with the population. So the next one, it's thank you very much for the opportunity of being here and sharing this project with us, which is already a partnership in practice here happening between the different companies and organizations from the UK and Brazil. Thank you very much.
Andrea, thank you very much indeed, for your presentation. This Pilar community project is very, very interesting. I know a bit the area around Duque de Caxias, in the outskirts of Rio. And that links up very much with what Gabriel had said about the opportunity with community, projects in DG in Brazil. So there's a huge opportunity there. Thank you very much indeed. So now we're going to the Q&As, right? So please feel free, the 5 speakers, also to ask one another, right? Any questions, but I'm taking it from the audience here. The first one, I just wanted to log because the Secretariat of Economic Development of the Rio Grande do Norte, the Norte State, RN is the acronym. SEDEC, SEDC, is represented by his secretary, Jaime Calado. And the representative is Mr. Olavo Oliveira and his technical advisor, Guido Salvi. Olavo Oliveira is the coordinator of the industrial area of SEDEC. Thank you very much for your presence here. So I will start with 2 questions. I think they are directed more to Gabriel. So I would ask the speakers to be very synthetic. You don't need to cover everything. We will pass on all the questions. They are being recorded here to the speakers. So the organizers will do that and they can reply straight if you send your emails or contacts. I think that you subscribed, to this session here. So you could, they could reply to your questions there. The first one is quite a specific one. It came via the chat, but not via the Q&A. So I'm doing an effort here with this Mr. Jerusa Magalhães. Is for Gabriel. Is there any study, I'm translating here, that we could access with numbers that demonstrate the impact for the other remaining consumers? Remaining means that they do not have DG. She's speaking about the tariff increases. So she thanks for that. And there is a second one for residential power generation. Is there a plan to enable the monetization of the net power injected in the network instead of the current energy credit scheme? So Gabriel, is for you. Please be brief, and then we'll move on to other ones. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the questions. Regarding the first one, I would like to highlight 2 studies. There's one, it's a master thesis by Simone, a colleague from University of São Paulo, that shows a 5% increase in the electricity tariffs on average until 2030. And there's also a paper by Vieira and Carpio published in the Renewable Energy Journal that shows a more substantial impact of in the range of 22 to 47% increase in the residential tariffs until 2035 due to the net metering scheme we have now in Brazil. And regarding the second question, if we have a plan to monetize injected power, I'll say that no, I don't see a regulatory or political movement to implement a feed-in tariff such as in the UK or Germany have, for instance.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Wow, this was very synthetic. Thank you. So I also would like to log the presence here of the coordinator of the energy sector, Mr. Hugo Fonseca of SEDEC, SEDC of Rio Grande do Norte. Thank you very much for being here, Mr. Fonseca. So there is a question for Rachel, specific one, and then there are some ones which are more general. Rachel, what would be the impact of innovation as part of the RIIO, the RIO model, with double I model, in the long term for the UK market and industry? Because I think this is a good practice, huh? Rachel, over to you.
Great, thank you for the question. As you said, Fabio, earlier, innovation is part of the RIO framework. So RIO actually stands for Revenue Equals Innovation, Incentives and Outputs. So innovation is really key to network regulation. There are a couple of ways in which networks are funded to innovate and can support these sorts of transitions. One through the Network Innovation Allowance, which is an annual allowance to networks to innovate, which can be shared with third parties, and the Strategic Innovation Fund, which runs across a 5-year price control period, and it's competitive, and there are £540 million available. So, and there are a series of principles which guide this innovation. These are currently being developed by Ofgem, along with industry and government feeding in. And so it's hard to say exactly what the role is, but there are mechanisms there in order to support that.
Rachel, oh my God, you're very straight to the point as well. Thank you very much indeed. Look, I didn't say the name of Mr. Marcelo Mazzaropi, about the second question for Gabriel. For residential power generations, there are plans to enable the monetization, etc. Okay, so now it is said. Now I'm moving to another question by Daniel Torquato. How do you guys see DG could help overcome the connectivity and digital access challenges in Brazil? Do you see any correlations between these two sectors? So I would maybe go to on Andre or Jamie or Aurelio as well. But the UK speakers could also jump in as well, please, because you've seen some things here about Brazil. So who would like to go?
I think I could just
Andrea, go ahead.
To kick off this ball. In terms of power assets and infrastructure and communication, they are kind of complementary to each other, particularly at this moment in time. You will need basically, as we were discussing here, more and more the equipment communicating with each other using IC protocol, and they would run pretty much automatically most of the tasks which become very complex in a world where intra-hour variation of generation will be very common. So this will be very, very much a game to be played in the telecommunication and data transmission. And therefore the two infrastructures are basically merging into the same system in order to create a future system where the equipment becomes autonomous, including battery chargers, electrical vehicles, what is going to happen 5 o'clock with the traffic, what is happening 5 o'clock with the weather, if there will be a renewable power or not. So there are a number of studies that show this very clearly. We have in the UK a number of the universities researching on this. I've been quite recently, because of pandemic, not as presential as I would like to, but through a similar experience as we are having now for an experience, for a research being conducted on electrical vehicles and what will be the trends in terms of usage and the movements and the timing and all that. So it will be a big merge, and the two infrastructure systems must be unified in a way.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Would you like to make any comments, Aurelio or Jamie or Gabriel or even Rachel?
I just add something.
Aurelio, go ahead.
Yep, I totally, fully agree. Nowadays, the consumer has a more like a passive position towards the grid. It's just turn on the light and the service is there. And in the future, it will be the other way around. Not in the future, it's happening already, but it's changing fast, it's growing. So it's the other way around. I'm generating my own energy. I have my car, I have my battery storage. So the system within the house, within the business, will have to communicate on an instant and alive with the network. So I totally agree with Andrea, and just adding this, the central position that the customer in the future will take is different from the passive position that they have today.
Thank you very much. Anybody else would like to make any comments? So we could move on to the next question. Thank you, Daniel Torquato, for your question on this. I have a question to all UK from Mr. Gilberto Januzzi, to all UK and Brazil panelists. What has been or expected the impacts on electricity tariffs, especially for the non-prosumers? So it's for all. I will repeat, what has been or expected the impacts on electricity tariffs, especially for the non-prosumers?
Fabio, I guess this is similar to the previous one that I already answered.
Yeah. Yes, I've seen this one. Would you like to make any more remarks, anyone? So let's move on to Mr. Tiago Sheklica. I know, Tiago. How are you, my friend? So the question is either Gabriel, or Jamie. How do you see DG coexisting with the energy-free market, Mercado Livre de Energia? In case the latter become available to residential consumers in 2024 or later, perhaps consumers should be able to choose the regulatory regime. So, Gabriel or Jamie? Jamie, go you first, please, Jamie.
Sure. You know, obviously, as an energy producer, we'd love to have access to the consumer market. So for us, you know, bring it on. I don't think it's going to happen in 2024. But as we look further forward to 2030, you know, maybe it is a possibility that we will be able to sell directly to households as well. And I think that just ties back into the digitalization and rollout of smart meters. You know, just touching on the other points where homes will become their own microgrids. You know, how many homes are going to have batteries in the future? You're going to be plugging your cars in as well. So from our side, I would like to have access to consumers. How realistic it is, in what time frame? Probably, you know, pass over to Gabriel to comment on the regulation side.
Gabriel, please.
Well, I would say that would be desirable to have a coexistence of the DG option and the free market for the consumers, not only the prosumers. So everyone will be able to have more alternatives for buying electricity. And in my point of view, for this to work, we will have to need a two-part tariff to recover the grid costs, and so the distribution and transmission costs, and then the energy part, it will be free to the consumer to choose if he wants this electricity coming from distributed generation, or he can buy it from the free market. So I guess it'd be good to deliver more options to the consumer at the end of the day.
Can I make a contribution, short contribution?
Sure, yes, Andrea, go ahead.
Well, just to give you an example, what Jamie has mentioned, today here in the UK, within 2 weeks, if you, for example, in my case, I installed heat pumps and I don't want to more use gas or anything, I can get a supplier to deliver only renewable energy, and within 2 weeks, I get only, for example, wind power or renewable energy, and then more service and less cost. And then I could even be paid during the weekend to use some appliances, because the prices during the weekend is so low that I have to utilize that, because they have to balance all of this. So I think this is coming, and it's just a matter of processing information, as Jamie pointed out.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Look, we do not have more time for further questions except one. But first, before passing it over to my good friend Richard Taylor, he's a good friend, but didn't pass it in front of anyone, right? I would like to log that some people that make questions here. Carlos Peixoto, he's the president of the Oil and Gas Committee in Britain. My good friend Peixoto, thank you for your question. Mrs. Ieda Gomes, thank you very much for being here, Ieda, again in the seminars of the UK government. Mr. Colin Black, Mr. Sudade Andrade Neto from Firjan Senai. Also from Ruberval Baldini from BR Solar Abeama, ABEAMA. Dave Washington, to Jamie, a question. Ruberval Baldini, another one. Carolina Gonçalves Santos from the National Operator of the System, ONS. And Marcelo Marques. So the final question goes to everyone. So please keep your remarks brief. Richard, from TEC Ventures asked, well, firstly, thank you for the great presentation. UK and Brazil, this is a very interesting one for a closing. UK and Brazil are both aiming to increase energy generation capacity significantly. What can the UK learn from Brazil's approach and vice versa? Again, what can the UK learn from Brazil's approach and vice versa? You could give, any of you, please, because it's very broad, just one or two aspects very quickly before we can close the session. Who would like to start?
I can start.
Sorry, who said it? Gabriel, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that Brazil can learn from the UK to have a more cost-reflective regulation. We saw in Rachel's presentation how they have more modern mechanisms such as curtailment or the grid charging regime she mentioned that aims to extract the real value of the distributed resource and also recover the cost imposed to the grid. So I would say to have a more cost-reflective regulation, we can learn from the UK.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Who would follow? Let's alternate. Rachel, would you like to go?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I mean, I sort of echo what Gabrielle said, and also in terms of kind of both directions, I think, the technology is moving so quickly. Andre mentioned about, that link between generation and consumers and that smart kind of world that's developing. As these technological developments are happening, I think it's really important we share those technological findings and experiences so that we can learn on both sides and improve.
Thank you very much. Aurelio, Jamie, and Andrea. Aurelio, go ahead.
I was going to approach through the business side, the opportunity that there is for UK companies and Brazil companies to work together in either way, there and here. Brazil, as you say, is a very strong renewable energy matrix, but can learn a lot from what already happened in the offshore wind, happened in the UK. I know the BEP, the Brazilian Energy Program, is working hard on this front. We also can work a lot with UK on the storage systems. They have been developing very good storage and mini grid networks as well in UK. So there is a lot of business opportunities between the two countries that can be work it out. You know, I guess this is the idea of this seminar, and this is a very good opportunity that we are here. I know a lot of people is already connecting the dots. What kind of opportunity? So I would say, Fabio, there is a huge opportunity because the energy matrix is changing everywhere. So there is a transition going everywhere. So it's a huge opportunity in this case for both Brazil and UK.
211 million people, was it said? Look, Andre, I will give it to Jamie because he opened the mic first, and then you close it, okay? Jamie first, okay, and then Andre, please.
Thanks, Fabio. I think from our personal experiences, we are literally seeing our off-takers in Brazil are coming to us here in the UK, and we never actually looked at becoming a solar developer in the UK, but now we literally have offers of PPA contracts from either parent companies or group companies of off-takers we work with in Brazil. So that just kind of shows how close the links are already. I think just to finish, I think it would be great if the UK was sunnier. That would be ideal. Unfortunately, it's not.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Jamie. Andre, over to you.
Just a small remark. I think we are already doing that. I think the Pilar project just is a bit of a first off in terms of a demonstration that the organizations can learn from each other and can make a scalable business that will be successful using models that come from either side of the collaboration. And I mean, I was even thinking about that Brazil is such like a natural place for solar power to be installed. And in the future, I think global warming is a serious business, so to speak. So there might be other forms such as carbon credits and other types of tools, cryptocurrencies, I don't know what, that will evolve into some sort of international piece of even regulation that will allow this to be compensated. I think that the sky is the limit there.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going for the final remarks. You know, this was kind of 50 years in 5. Those who remember the saying from the 50s in Brazil, from a president in Brazil in the 50s. So thank you. It was a very intensive session here. Very good. Well, I give the same thanks as at the start, just highlighting Ana and the team. You too, Vinicius, Ana with double N Barbosa, Ana Terra, who is Ana Land. In English, Terra is land. And the team, Ana Barbosa, Vinicius, my good friend Renato Cordeiro from Her Majesty's government. And I would like to thank for the partnership between the government, the UK government with Britain here. And of course, I wouldn't forget it, my special thanks to Rachel, Gabriel, Aurelio, Jamie, and Andre. All success possible for you. Thank you to the audience for being here, for the questions. Those were a lot. We will forward it to you, right, the organizers. And do not miss the other sessions of the UK and Brazil Partners in Energy 2021. I'm quite sure they will be as good as this one. So I'll just finish with my last words. Stay healthy and well, you and yours, internally and externally. Muito obrigado. Thank you so much. Grande abraço, big hug. All the best for all of you. Bye-bye.